A legal earthquake has shaken the West Coast, with its epicenter at the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. The court, long seen as a liberal stronghold, has issued its first-ever Second Amendment mandate, forcing a state to change its gun laws. The decision sends shockwaves through California and the 9 other states under its jurisdiction. For gun rights advocates, it's a monumental victory. For gun control supporters, a devastating blow. Immediate and far-reaching consequences are certain. The story is still unfolding. The Second Amendment is just 27 words long, but its meaning has been fiercely debated for over 2 centuries. Is it an individual right to own guns, or a collective right for state militias? This ambiguity has fueled legal battles and political divisions since America's founding. For much of history, courts linked the right to militia service, allowing broad gun regulation. But in the late 20th century, a movement argued for an individual right, citing history and the framers' intent. Gun rights organizations like the NRA championed this view, funding legal challenges and lobbying lawmakers. This shift set the stage for a major legal showdown. The debate isn't just academic, it shapes elections, public policy, and how Americans view safety and freedom. The 2 main interpretations represent 2 very different visions of America: collective security versus individual liberty. That's why the Second Amendment remains one of the most controversial parts of the Constitution. The courts are the primary battleground for this conflict. Each ruling has real-world consequences. The legacy of the Second Amendment is still being written, and the fight over its meaning is far from over. The modern era of Second Amendment law began in 2008 with District of Columbia versus Heller. The Supreme Court affirmed for the first time that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess a firearm for self-defense at home. This struck down DC's handgun ban, but the court said the right isn't unlimited. Laws banning felons from owning guns or restricting firearms in sensitive places could stand. In 2010, McDonald versus Chicago extended this right to the states, making local gun laws subject to Second Amendment challenges. For years, lower courts used a 2-step test to weigh gun laws, often upholding restrictions. Gun rights supporters grew frustrated, feeling courts ignored the spirit of Heller. Everything changed in 2022 with New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. The court struck down New York's strict carry law and created a new test. Gun regulations must be consistent with the nation's historical tradition. This history and tradition test replaced the old balancing approach, making it much harder for states to defend modern gun control laws. The Bruin decision sent shockwaves through the legal system. Courts across the country were forced to re-examine gun laws under this new, stricter standard. The stage was set for dramatic changes, and for the Ninth Circuit's unprecedented mandate. The legal landscape for gun rights had fundamentally shifted. The consequences are still unfolding. The next chapter would be written in California, and the whole country was watching. A court mandate, or writ of mandamus, is an extraordinary legal tool, a direct order from a higher court to enforce the law. It's reserved for rare cases where a lower court or official refuses to do their duty. The Ninth Circuit's mandate is historic. It commands a California district court to immediately block a state gun law. For years, the Ninth Circuit upheld strict gun laws, but the Supreme Court's Bruin decision changed the rules. Now, the Ninth Circuit must apply the new history and tradition. Test. This is the first time the court has used a mandate to enforce a Second Amendment right. The message is clear: delays and defiance of Second Amendment rulings will no longer be tolerated. It's a powerful precedent for other cases in the West. The legal landscape has shifted. The era of slow-walking gun rights decisions in the Ninth Circuit is over. A new chapter in gun litigation has begun. The case at the heart of this mandate is Miller versus Bonta. James Miller, a California gun rights advocate, challenged the state's decades-old assault weapons ban. The law, passed in 1989, prohibits certain semi-automatic rifles, pistols, and shotguns based on cosmetic features. Gun rights groups argue these firearms are in common use for lawful purposes: sport, hunting, and home defense. California claims these weapons are unusually dangerous and suited for mass shootings. The legal battle has raged for years. In 2021, Judge Roger Benitez struck down the law, calling the AR-15 a Swiss Army knife. California appealed, and the case was put on hold for the Supreme Court's Bruin decision. After Bruin, the Ninth Circuit sent the case back to Benitez, who again struck down the law in 2023. California appealed again, but a Ninth Circuit panel agreed with Benitez. The ban was unconstitutional under Bruin. California used legal maneuvers to keep the law in effect during further appeals. The continued delay prompted the Ninth Circuit's dramatic mandate in January 2026, ordering the law blocked immediately. The case became a national flashpoint. The mandate marked a turning point in the fight over gun rights in California, and it set the stage for what would come next. Judge Ryan Nelson, joined by Judge Consuelo Callahan, wrote the majority opinion behind the mandate. Their reasoning was clear. The only task was to apply the Supreme Court's Bruin test. California failed to show any historical tradition of banning weapons based on features. The judges rejected comparisons to laws restricting dangerous and unusual weapons, noting AR-15s are among the most popular rifles in America. These are not rare weapons, Judge Nelson wrote. They are in common use by millions for lawful purposes. The opinion emphasized that the Second Amendment protects weapons chosen by the people for self-defense. While acknowledging the tragedy of mass shootings, the court said its job is to interpret the Constitution, not decide policy. The judges suggested public safety could be addressed through background checks or red flag laws, not outright bans. The opinion also justified the extraordinary mandate, accusing California of massive resistance and legal delay. Justice delayed is justice denied, Nelson wrote, insisting further delays would cause irreparable harm. The mandate was necessary to vindicate constitutional rights and enforce the court's judgment. The message: the courts will no longer tolerate stalling on Second Amendment rights. The legal standard is now clear, and the consequences are immediate. Judge William Fletcher's dissent warned of dire consequences. He argued the majority misapplied the Bruin test, ignoring the unprecedented threat of modern semi-automatic rifles. Fletcher insisted the framers couldn't have foreseen today's weapons, making direct historical comparison illogical. He focused on public safety, citing mass shooting statistics and predicting more violence as a result of the ruling. Fletcher accused the majority of judicial activism, overriding the will of California's elected representatives. He criticized the use of the mandate, calling it drastic and unnecessary while legal appeals were still possible. Fletcher warned this could set a dangerous precedent, encouraging judicial impatience and undermining justice. He predicted a flood of litigation and the invalidation of similar laws in other states. Today's decision is a victory for the gun lobby, he wrote, but a loss for public safety and common sense. His dissent captured the anxieties of those who see strong gun laws as essential. The division runs deep, and the debate is far from settled. The Ninth Circuit's decision will have immediate, widespread effects beyond California. Similar laws in other Western states are now in legal jeopardy, with gun rights groups poised to challenge them. Politically, the ruling will dominate the 2026 midterms and 2028 presidential race, fueling both parties' rhetoric. Republicans will hail the decision as a victory for liberty. Democrats will warn it puts lives at risk. Socially, the ruling deepens America's cultural divide, celebrated in gun-friendly states, feared in those with stricter laws. Protests, calls for federal action, and economic shifts in the firearms industry are likely. Law enforcement agencies will have to adapt to new realities on the ground. Billions in consumer spending could shift as new markets open for gun manufacturers. The decision forces a confrontation between two fundamentally different visions of America. The fallout is just beginning. The Ninth Circuit's mandate in Miller v. Bonta is more than a legal victory. It's a turning point in America's gun debate. The decision invalidates California's decades-old ban and signals that resistance to Second Amendment rulings won't be tolerated. Legal and political turmoil will follow as other states' laws are challenged. The Supreme Court will likely have the final say, with the potential to clarify or reshape the Bruin test. Experts are divided. Some say the Ninth Circuit is enforcing the law of the land. Others warn it threatens public safety. This moment calls for reflection, not just reaction. The courts have pushed the issue to the forefront, but the solution must come from the American people and their representatives. This is not just a legal question, it's about the kind of country we want to live in. How do we balance the right to bear arms with the right to safety? This ruling doesn't end the debate. It forces us to have it, urgently. The conversation requires listening, understanding, and a shared commitment to finding a path forward. The future of gun rights and regulation in America hangs in the balance. The next chapter is up to us.